This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Another episode, Real Estate Investing 365. Today, I got on the show Joe McCabe. He is a real estate broker in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. He's the owner of REMAX Experts, Homefront Mortgage, Keystone State Abstract Title Company, and Allstate Insurance Company. He's a U.S. Army veteran, and he's based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they have about 176 units or so, but always gaining. So what's up, Joe? How's it going? Thanks for being here.
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. I heard you on a couple other podcasts, so I thought this is a guy that is doing way too much and we need to learn from him. So
yeah, definitely. That's my motto. I never know what I'm doing, but I do start it, and other people don't. So that's my big difference.
Well, it's working out for sure. So why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of background first, like where you come from. You were in the Army, now you get all these businesses. So we'll go through the whole timeline of how you got to where you are.
Sure. Yeah, born and raised in Philadelphia. Went to all schools in Philadelphia. I went to Father Judge High School for any Philadelphia people that are going to listen. I was raised by a cop and a teacher, so we weren't in a bad spot at all. But I just didn't want to. I realized at some point I didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck, or at least I find out later that was definitely in the back of my head. And so I went away to Penn State for 2 years, Penn State University on the west side near Pittsburgh, which is where most of our real estate holdings are. And 2 years into that, I was in ROTC, and they're like, well, the job that you want, you can't even be an officer. You have to be enlisted. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I had to enlist in the Army after 2 years of waking up at 6 a.m. to do PT. I enlisted in the Army. And then I really just kind of accelerate from that moment on. So once I enlisted in the Army, I went away I had 3 months to get through all my training, pass everything, come back, and then start school again. So I was already set up to go to Cabrini College. I was going to bang out my last year and become a cop. And at some point while I was in basic training, or not basic training, but the AIT school, your trade school, basically, I started taking my real estate courses online because it was just like a $99 offer. So I take my real estate courses, and I never did anything with them, but I ended up getting licensed and going through that process. So basically within the span of a year, I finished, a span of like 9 months, I finished my bachelor's degree, graduated early, did another school for the Army. So I went from like computers to military police investigator, got my real estate license, and just started hammering out real estate that following year. So I graduated early, and what would have been my fourth year of college, I started selling real estate while going through the police academy process. So I think I was just like, I need money in the meantime.
Yeah.
So I had a start date with Philly Police, which was actually the day after my birthday in December 31st. And previous to that, in November, we had already bought a REMAX franchise. And I was still like, I'm going to the police department. I'm going to bridge it. Because I know a lot of cops in Philly that sell real estate, and they'll make $100,000 because it's easy. There's so many cops that you're working with, and they're flexible with your schedule, and they have to work with you. So I was like, I'm going to do that. But my partner at the time was a lieutenant on the police department. He was going to be our broker. My dad was a cop. Everyone, I think 9 immediate family members are cops. And I kind of had gotten my police fix in the Army. And everyone's like, just don't do it. Like, just go into real estate first. You can always become a cop later. Like, they don't even require a college degree now, which is the only reason I went to college was because I wanted to be a cop. And now they don't require it in Philly. So I ended up buying the franchise, starting the REMAX. I was working at Keller before I opened the REMAX, and I kind of had realized while I was there, and this is the part that made me hesitant to go in the police department, there was so much money to be made that was untapped by these other realtors, and I'm not good at being under people, but I was on a team with Nancy Aulette in Philadelphia, and she's been an amazing, consistent producer her whole life. She actually was a partial owner in a REMAX before she went to Keller. And so she taught me everything, but we started to butt heads at some point because, I was 50-50 and I know everything. So I thought, and so we eventually broke up, and I started, I met with the broker and the owner of Keller Williams in Langhorne, and they're like, you really are not you're not really meant to be a salesperson. You really should be running the company if this is your attitude and this is the way you think. And so I ended up opening the REMAX, and then eventually the title company came right afterwards. And then, REMAX have rolled out their mortgage franchise, which honestly sucked, but we broke away from them and then started our own mortgage company, Homefront Mortgage. But REMAX has started Motto Mortgage, and then eventually Allstate. But what I realized was that not only was there's just so many things that that are generated by the real estate salesperson that are easily tapped into, not only by the salespeople, but by the broker. You can easily put your hand into title insurance. And in Pennsylvania, we're probably one of the most profitable states, so it's easy. Then mortgage brokering, then, homeowners insurance and auto insurance and life insurance. Some people even get into financial planning, but, we haven't touched that yet, and I don't think I will. But there's just so many things to touch on, and there's so much untapped potential.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's one of the key things that I think like David Green has talked about recently. I'm in a little mastermind with him, and he's doing the same kind of thing, exactly the same thing you are, but he says you want to be vertically integrated, once you get into one field and you get really good at it, just start expanding your businesses to, service everybody that you're working with, right? Like when somebody comes
in. You could tell David Green to get back to me. We've actually talked about him opening a branch of Homefront Mortgage.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what he's ended up doing, right now. But that totally makes sense because there's so many things that a first-time home buyer, all the home buyers need. They need title, they need insurance, they need home buying assistance, they need all that stuff. So that's freaking awesome. But let's step back a moment. So you were in the Army. Was this a several year period, or were you in the Army Reserves or?
Yeah, I was in the reserves. Yep, I was in the reserves. But what I was doing, it was kind of it was pretty chaotic. I mean, that whole time too, I had worked at multiple places. I was a trainer. I was a manager at GNC Nutrition. I was working at LA Fitness. So I was kind of I was all over the place. Plus, every moment I got, I was probably a pain in the ass to the Army because I wanted to be around all the guys in my new unit. Once I went in as a cable systems installer, or 25 Lima, and it was basically making fiber optic cable, which is kind of cool. But I only did that to get into the military. I just needed to go through the process, and I knew I was going to go MP. So I finally got an MP slot. And when I got to my unit, I had an opportunity to go CID, which is the Army's detective version. So I was able to, actually the CID units are more like Secret Service, but for the Pentagon, or they're more like the FBI almost. Mm-hmm. So I got to go in there, and I was the youngest guy in there at the time. I was only 21 or 22. All these guys are 30, 40, 50-year-old guys that are all chief warrant officers, senior enlisted guys. And they're either FBI agents on the civilian side. A lot of them were higher ups in NYPD. One of them was the mayor's. He ran the mayor's guard in Newark. He was their helicopter pilot and their SWAT commander. So these guys, and one of them ran the Newark FBI field office. So I was any chance I got to be in that office, I was there.
Yeah.
But so I used to just go and I'd be like, hey, do you guys have any extra hours? Because we were a small unit. So they kind of allocate how many drill days they could use. I would use up all their drill days. I would just come in and do paperwork so I could read their police reports and stuff. And but anything I could do to get money at that time to bridge selling real estate. I was kind of waiting for the next sale type of thing.
Yeah.
So it all happened simultaneously. And then when I wasn't there, I was at GNC or I was training people at LA Fitness. I think my LA Fitness time was short-lived. I don't think I didn't like training people very much because they weren't aggressive enough. It seemed like I was their counselor, and I'm not a good counselor.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. We own a gym, and my wife does training and nutrition and all that stuff. And I've kind of tapped in, done a little bit of training. I don't charge people, but people that want some help. And it doesn't really usually work out too well. Cause I'm like, listen, do this, and you're being lazy
Right.
and you're not eating right and you're not working out hard enough. Like you're just not doing the work, but people don't like to hear that. They want
Yeah, they
the
don't want
reason,
to hear that.
the reason why they are where they are is because they haven't done the work in the past. So, I understand what you're saying there.
Actually owned a gym for a little bit too in Jersey. We
Oh
bought
yeah,
we bought someone's gym that went out of business, and we bought a Powerhouse gym franchise, and then we kind of flipped it and sold it to someone else.
man, you got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I don't
That's cool.
understand the timeline, to be honest with you. Sometimes
Yeah,
I look at the date and I'm like, I'll find old paperwork from Powerhouse Gym, and I'm like, wow, that was in 2017. I don't even remember, but
yeah.
we just always have the gas pedal down.
Okay, so you're an agent while you're doing all this, and it kind of takes you a while. So how many years were you an agent before you could actually open your REMAX franchise?
Oh, it wasn't long. By the time I had purchased the REMAX franchise, I would say I was I've been licensed 6 years, and I bought the REMAX franchise maybe 2 years into it.
Okay, that's us.
1 year, yeah, and then 1 year into being an agent, we had already opened our title company, which is a good way to piss off Keller Williams brokers,
Yeah.
because they like to keep everything in house, and that's they're pretty big on having their in-house title and then selling shares to the better producers in the office to retain them. Um, that's what they do. And so when I opened my own title company as a new agent, they're like, are you out of your mind? Like, you can't do that. And I was like, well, RESPA people, yes, I can. You can't tell me not to, start a business. And that's when we started to really see, well, one, I can't work for people.
Yeah.
And, and I started to see the secrets, and I realized that as a real estate broker, you can't, real estate brokers in 2020, especially now, the way the market is shifting and their margins are getting cut, that's going to continue to happen, because not even, forget about this whole commission 3%, 2.5% bullshit, but just focusing on the realtor's commission going higher and higher and higher and higher. If they're not tapping into ancillary services, they're eventually going to fail. So I think you need not only ancillary services, but you need tons and tons of agents, and then you better provide value to them. Or you need to be a boutique broker that's actually, like a commercial broker, where they only do commercial brokering and only in a certain area. Like someone like that will be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But, an all-around brokerage that just wants to work on an 80-20 split, provide no value to their agents, have 20 people, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's just where everything's going.
Yeah, for sure. So before we dive into like the real estate investing side, two questions. One, why did you stick or go over to a REMAX franchise instead of sticking in the Keller Williams family? And two, what's your advice for somebody that wants to become an agent? Like, what type of brokerage should they go with? Should they go with Keller Williams or is a REMAX, or like what should they look for in a brokerage to hang their license at?
Yeah, I think a lot of people. So I did I didn't go to Keller Williams for any particular reason. I just wanted a place to hang my license. I've never been someone who was like, you can tell me everything you're going to offer me, and that's great. I'm still going to do it on my own. I'm just kind of that person. But, if you are going to go somewhere and you're big on training, I wouldn't say that, Keller Williams is huge on training, but I don't think that their training's kind of cookie cutter, and it's built by corporate people who aren't really in the field. So the big thing that so we went from last year, I told you I had a partner at some point. I got rid of my partner, two partners. I got rid of them out of the businesses. We went from 9 agents to 75 agents in less than a year, pretty much. No, now it's more than a year. Now we have 75. But so we did that in about a year and 3 months. And one of the things that we're providing are not only all the training that KW offers, that's great. We provide it too. We provide a better commission split. We provide, waivers on monthly fees, and then we're also giving them leads. And I think that that's the component that most brokers miss out on, is they don't want to invest in giving leads to new agents. I'll give leads to new agents, and then I'll help them close them. I'll personally go out on the deal. Or I'll get one of my, or I'll put them on a team. Like my whole thing is I'm helping everybody build their brands, or not even their brands. But if someone comes to me who's a midway agent, they're doing 30 to 40 deals, the next natural progression at 30 to 40 deals might be to hire an assistant. Okay, I'll help you do that. Or maybe it's to build a team. Well, if you want to build a team, we need to get you people. But guess what? I hire a bunch of new people that I don't have time for. So I put those new people on that team leader's team, provide them with even more leads. Now the team leader gives them leads. And next thing you know, we have brand new agents doing 30 deals their first year. So we've been really successful at actually, putting leads in the business. And we don't charge as much as every other broker. So I think, I meet with people all the time who are at KW, and we recruit mainly from KW. That's who we get from. And when they come here, they're like, well, I'm going to interview with Coldwell Banker and Long and Foster. And I always say, but just stay with KW then. Like, you're going to the wrong place. It's either KW or REMAX. Don't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's especially in Philadelphia, So, hey, if you're going to go somewhere and there's not a REMAX to interview with, go to KW. But if there's a REMAX to interview with, we're all independently owned and operated. So every office is different. We're not corporate at all. That's why I have full flexibility. And that, to answer your question, why'd I go to REMAX? Well, because I can do everything as long as I don't screw with the logo and I pay their fees. That's it. So I can do whatever I want, commission splits, training, I can do whatever I want. And that was important to me.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, because it does seem like a lot of Keller Williams offices, they're like businesses under businesses under businesses. Like they have corporate, then they have the regional owners that own a bunch of franchises, and then they have the independent offices that kind of has their own broker in house, and then under that they have teams, and it's just like, I don't know. I feel like you don't really have the flexibility to do as much of your own thing as some people might want. Somebody like you, especially.
Yeah, and it's funny because sometimes, I guess people try to negotiate the best deal, and I don't blame them for it. And I don't really tell people that I was at Keller when we're interviewing them, but they'll be like, yeah, well, Keller has me on a different split. And in the back of my head, I'm like, no, they don't, dude. Like, Keller is so corporate. I know you're all 70, like everyone's 70-30 and there's a franchise fee off the top. That's it. Like, that's across the board. That's just how it is. So I think that, they've got a brand, but I think that the mistake that they're making is bring in everybody, which is okay if you're going to selectively bring in everybody, I guess, bring in new agents. But they're more like bring in new agents, give them enough training, charge them for it, though, so that you're not losing money there and you're making money off them there, because 80% of them are going to get out of the business. So within the first 2 years, you're going to collect all that money on training, and they're eventually going to get out of the business. But maybe you've enticed them enough that they're going to fall for your recruiting incentive. Or maybe they close 1 or 2 deals and you get 50% of that deal. And I think that that's wrong. I think that that's taking advantage of them. And I think, that's not the right way to do it, because I see their turnover. Mm-hmm. And most, I get all their turnover. So yeah. I'm not complaining about it. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So at some point during all this, you obviously decided to get into buying rental property, which seems like a natural progression for you, but it's not always a natural progression for real estate agents, because a lot of real estate agents, obviously, for some weird reason, don't buy real estate as investment property. Kind of walk me through that. How did you get started in buying the properties, and then your process for buying them? Because it's a little bit different than most people, right?
Yeah. So when we were at some point, again, I used to go to the same gym for 18 years. And my family went there. I mean, most of those 18 years, I was in the daycare upstairs. But I used to go to that gym, and there was this older guy who used to be on the he used to lift super heavy, but he was in there for an hour and a half, and then he was out and he'd play racquetball and he'd be all taped up. The guy was crazy. And one day I saw him benching 225, and he asked me for a spot. I was like, man, this guy's gonna die. And he's 96.
Oh,
so.
Wow.
I gave him the spot, and he sits up and we start talking a little bit. And I told him I just got licensed with real estate. He said, oh, I'm a real estate broker. And I said, oh, I didn't know that, Bob. Because we've known him for 18 years. Just always said hi to him, had no idea. And he's like, you see this Rolex? This is how I got it. And he starts telling me all about it, and how he owned 1,500 units. Damn. And how he was partners with the Galman Group in Philadelphia, which is massive. And, just running through all these stories. And I said, well, man, I'd like to buy that, property like that. Can I come work for you? He said, I'm not really that type of broker that you would work for me. He's like, I just manage my own property. He was like, but why don't you go to a brokerage? I was already at Keller. He's like, stay where you are, buy and sell real estate for a few years. He was like, and then don't waste my time until then.
There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Gotcha.
He's like, don't waste my time until then. Buy and sell real estate for a little bit, and then we'll have lunch. So I did. I started to buy and sell with clients. He's like, you need to learn the value of real estate first. So I did. I started doing that. And that was probably the first 6 months of real estate. I hated it because I didn't really understand commission only and how hard it was. So that second 6 months, I put the pedal down. I think that second 6 months, I probably made like 75 or 80,000. I met with him. I brought my books to show I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so we went to lunch at this Chinese restaurant that he always goes to. And he basically at the end of the meeting hands me a spreadsheet of all this real estate, 91 properties. He's like, I want you to sell this for me. And I said, well, why don't you sell it? You're a real estate broker. He's like, but I don't know how to use all the social media and stuff. And he's like, and I know that this can't go on just the MLS. So I put it out there, and I line up I probably brought through like 13 or 14 buyers, and they would fight over like the smallest amount of money.
Yeah.
And finally we had a buyer who was like same synagogue, like they knew each other's families. I was like, oh, this is perfect. They end up fighting at the end of the deal over it was like 90 grand. It was so ridiculous.
90 properties. That's crazy.
It was like 90 grand on $14 million. And I was like, Bob, listen, I can give you the money you want, but I have this idea. If you sell or finance these to me, if you give me the properties, sell or finance them, hold the deeds in escrow, I'll refinance out of them. And whatever the difference is between what they lend and what you wanted, I'll hold as a seller second, and we'll defer it for another 5 years, knowing that in 5 years, I'll have paid down enough principal that we can refi again and pay off everything. So it takes me like 2 weeks. He agrees. He agrees to do the deal. We write everything up, and his partner, who is a clown still to this day, and Bob knows he's a clown, decides that it's a better idea for them to renovate the properties and then flip them individually. So I show them how stupid that is. I literally go through each and every single property, show them what it would look like, cost to renovate, because at this point, I've gone through them all with 14 different buyers. Cost to renovate, what it's going to resell for, here's the commissions, here's the transfer taxes, on and on. And they ended up going that route. But at this point, I'd come up with that idea at least. So
real quick, you were gonna, let's say he was selling the property just for $14 million for all 90 properties. Mm-hmm. And then you were going to say, hey, listen, why don't we put it under escrow for 75% loan to value, which would be like, let's say $11 million. Yeah. And then when I refinance, they'll give me $14 million, but then you can hold the additional $3 million as seller second, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Like, let's say even in this scenario, right? Cause I'm not putting any cash out. And they were cash flowing pretty good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, maybe it's not the best business practice, but to go from 0 properties to 91 properties, I was willing to do it. I was willing to basically overpay and pay at least market value. So if they were actually worth 14 million, like you said, when we would refi, we'd get the appraisals back. Let's say they did come in at 14 million, we'd be able to give him that 11 million. So he would have to hold a seller second for that difference, that $3 million.
Okay.
For another 5 years. And then in 5 years, we would refinance again, pay off both loans, refi the 11 million, mm-hmm. but then wrap in that 3 million because we have a balloon with him. So we'd pay him off. So he's basically just deferring 3 million for a period of 5 years.
Yeah.
And you figure by the time, the way Philadelphia real estate appreciates, in 5 years, you'd have enough appreciation, enough principal pay down on the other loan that you could just pay him off entirely. And if you couldn't pay him off, the way that these loans are structured, or the loans that we would use, you could do a partial release where we could sell 1 or 2 properties with the most equity and free up that cash and then use that to pay him off. So there were a few different routes that I had run through with him, and he was cool with it. Plus, he's bought all of these properties creatively. He's owned them for years. He's not hard up. He appreciated the year and a half that I sold these to multiple people. And I used to just come out like, hopefully he never hears this. I don't think he will. But I literally was like, Bob, you're going to die before we fucking sell these. And we were having lunch one day, and he's like slurping his hot and sour soup. And he's like, oh my God, you're aggressive. And I was like, well, you're going to die. Like, I don't understand. You're never going to sell these. You're not going to live long enough to renovate these. Of course, he's still alive.
Yeah.
He's actually one of our hard money lenders. But that's how frustrated I was getting, because we would fight over the dumbest things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, you know what? Maybe now I got him because he wants to help somebody. He really wants to help somebody like grow a portfolio, and he wanted to help me do it. And then his partner stepped in and really screwed things up. So.
Okay. So that deal kind of fell through, but at least you got like kind of a good mentor, a good guy that is kind of teaching you the ropes. So then what was your first portfolio properties you end up buying?
Well, so the first one we buy takes about 150 to 200 offers. And again, I still have this, I have this concept, but I didn't really understand the cost. I didn't own a mortgage company at this point. I've probably only done, I don't know, let's say 16 sales. And so I start just submitting offers on every website, every platform you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just submitting offers. And I was using Crexy, which I think I talked about in other videos. And
so you're
Crexy
submitting
is great.
offers yourself directly from those platforms?
Yeah, exactly. And
But
I'm putting myself down as the broker.
Okay. So somebody that doesn't have their license couldn't do that, but their broker, if they
they could still submit it. So on Crexy, you could just submit an LOI real easy. So if you go on Crexy, it's like on the right-hand side, it has the NOI, the cap rate, the purchase price. So I would just look at that real quick and be like, I like a 9% cap, because I know that after the debt, just knowing the numbers roughly, that between a 9 and 11% cap rate after debt, we're still making a pretty decent profit.
Uh-huh.
So I would just submit these constantly, and I'd submit full priced offers. And then I would, because I know it's going to take people a long time to get back to me, if they ever get back to me. And then in the notes on the LOI, I would say that I need the seller to 100% seller finance this for a period not to exceed 6 months. And then I'll refinance them. And then I'll say, that, initially I wasn't saying this, but we discovered this later, and this is what I do now. I'll say, we're willing to allow the seller to continue to manage and collect the money, but we need the deeds in escrow. So we need something to show the bank and say, hey, look, we have the deeds in escrow. The seller's situation changed. Before they were going to seller finance this long term, but they really have decided that, whatever, they have a different circumstance, and they would rather us obtain financing. So we're going to record these deeds once we get a commitment to refinance. Lenders are pretty much okay with that. So as long as you have it in your name and you can pull a title policy in your name, and when they run the searches, it comes up in your name, who cares? So we would do that once we got a commitment to refinance. And that's what we do now. Sometimes, again, it's preferred that it just goes right into your name. It's much cleaner. But we're willing to be flexible because we're not putting out any money. So that's the biggest piece, is being flexible with these sellers, because they are out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first deal, it took you like 150 or 200 offers. You're just putting out offers left and right. You end up finally getting a deal that was a package of homes or properties, right?
Yeah, it ended up being, so initially he calls us back about maybe like 15 or 20 units, and a lot of them were under value. A lot of them were like below 50,000 per unit, and for single family financing, on a blanket loan, you have to be above 50,000 per property. They'll go to 48 or 49, but 50,000. And so those didn't work. So he started swapping out some properties. We get it under contract. We get a commitment to refinance. And the broker goes, wait a minute, I got 3 more guys that are willing to do this also. I was like, shit, okay, well, so let's go. We'll take it down. So we get all 3 the other guys under contract. The first guy was in no hurry. He was like an electrician that started his own electrical supply company, and then started a bunch of other businesses. And he had built up his business by like going to people's houses to do electrical jobs and finding out that they were going to sell. And then he'd buy them cash, or he'd get them a tax sale.
Yeah.
So we were able to do a deal with him, and then it just sprung into these 3 other deals. And that was our first mistake on this deal, because what I didn't realize was, now we're dealing with 4 different sellers. One of the sellers was super unreasonable, so his deal ends up getting kicked out at some point. We couldn't even do it. Like he wasn't willing to hold a seller second for the difference. It wasn't going to cash flow no matter what we did, and he was just kind of crazy. Now the second group of sellers were 2 attorneys and 1 doctor that hated each other. So we were able to get that. We were able to get a really attractive deal. like anything we asked for, we just pretty much got it done. And they would bully each other. They would be cursing at each other on the phone. And I was like, you guys want me to just hang up so you can finish this call?
That's that
And then the other,
East Coast thing.
oh, it was aggressive. Like the one guy was like, I make $400 an hour. I don't have time to be on this fucking call. And I'm like, all right, well, you know, I don't want to be on this call if it makes anybody feel better. Like, can we, you know, get off of here? And then the other two guys, they were the two guys that they had clean portfolios. Everything was paid off. All their debts were up to, you know, all their taxes were paid. And they were easy to deal with. But these two attorneys and this doctor, they owed, I think, over $1 million in like back taxes, personal taxes. There were liens, judgments, you name it. It was on this portfolio.
Wow.
So like literally last minute on this deal, they find out that they owe that much money and they try to back out of it. I mean, it was a whole shit show.
Yeah.
But assuming that doesn't happen, this deal, you know, this structure works. Now we still got that one done. But it was quite a shit show. And we actually had to arrange to have a seller second in place. And these guys hated each other so much that there were probably 4 or 5 days in this deal where I had to drive from Philly to Pittsburgh, which is drive, same day. So I drive there and back same day and then go to the office, all because I needed to get like a piece of paper from the tax office that they couldn't fax or scan, like crazy stuff like that. So our first lesson there was like not to do this with multiple sellers, because after we had purchased these and acquired these all, they all did transfer these into our name. So deeds weren't in escrow or any of that. We had to refinance these dealing with 4 different sellers. So we had 4 different sets of problems, and we were putting them all under one blanket loan. So we're trying to clean up. At the time, it was about 100 units. And, you know, after we had kicked out the properties that didn't appraise, it went down to like 77 units, which is where we are now in Pittsburgh. So we have 77 there. Okay, all single family stuff.
So you got 77 single family properties from 4 different sellers, and you got all these deals from one broker that had, you know, one group of properties first. And he said, hey, I got these other guys that could come in with that. Right.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's crazy. It's a big story.
Yeah, it was a mess. It was a mess.
But it's a good learning process.
And that deal, basically, it took about 1.5 to 2 years to close that, you know, from start to finish. Because some of them, like, we had to stabilize these deals. We had to get, you know, there's financing requirements that these guys, they're like, yeah, you know, they're 90% occupied. And then we go see them and it's like, well, these are vacant. Like, they've clearly been vacant forever. So, you know, by the time, and this is not standard, right? This was our first deal. So this is just stuff to watch out for. But we had to put, the sellers had to put $80,000 into these properties, which doesn't, again, this is not the standard way. We've done this since this deal, and this has not happened. But we had to have them put $80,000 in. We made them change their management to a management company that we chose. Took 6 months for the management company to stabilize and get them 90% occupied. We had to pick and choose properties at one point. Like, we had our commitment to refinance. The lender's like, well, we're not going to lend on these 5. And it's like, then that affects the cash flow. So we need 5 more properties. Then we had to pay for more appraisals. And then we'd pay for more appraisals, and then the appraisals we already had would expire by the time the new ones came in. And it was like, it was just constant, like, and here it is, it's just me and, you know, me, new real estate agent with basically no money, and Carl, a Philly cop with also no money. Yeah. And we had cashed out his retirement to buy that, which wasn't a lot at the time, but it was like 20 grand. And so we had used all of that. And we basically had to convince these sellers to put up all the money. They paid for our appraisals at some point, and then put 80 grand out of their pockets to renovate these units. But they didn't have a choice because there's really not a lot of institutional investors or really any investors out there buying single family portfolios, because all these real estate gurus and everyone else are out there talking about syndication bullshit and multifamilies and all that. And I'm just like, we're out here buying single family that are cash flowing and, you know, actually making money.
No, that makes sense. Like, when everybody's going one way, you need to go the other way. So fast forward real quick, just to give some context, how many units do you guys have currently?
So we have 176 now.
176 units now. And I think you're under contract, or you're kind of in the process of buying more also, or?
Yeah, actually. And one of them came from, I think you heard me on Joe Fairless, right?
Yeah.
So one of them came from that show. The guy reached out to me and said he had, I think it's 56 or 57 units in Kentucky. And, he's like, I can't sell them. I've had it on market forever. And I was like, well, shit, we'll buy it. And he's like, yeah, they'll sell or finance it. And then it just started to spiral from there. I mean, I was on the Active Duty Investment podcast, Active Duty Passive Income. I was on their podcast. And when we hung up the call, the guy calls me. He's like, hey, I have 6 units near Pittsburgh. Bought those. So, that's where the seller finance is out there. And these people were just offering it. And with flexible terms. Some were willing to do interest only. Some are willing to hold it for 10 years. Some want to hold it for 1 year. Some want you to cash them out in 6 months. So you don't need a lot of money to do this. The deal still needs to be good. I guess don't be stupid about the deal. But there's just so much out there.
Okay, so I want to, this might be taking a step back, but real quick, I want to dial in exactly the process. So let's do a simplified process of how you structure these deals. Because for somebody that's kind of newer, they're like probably their head's spinning. They don't know what to think right now. So you, let's say a seller comes, or you find a seller that has a group of 10 properties. Those 10 properties he's trying to sell, they're single family houses. He's not getting anybody. So you say, hey, kind of walk me through the process. Exactly what happens. You offer, and then what's next?
Yeah. So what we do first is, if we submit that LOI and we see it's been sitting on market, the broker calls us back. Well, I got your LOI. I didn't really understand the structure. And at that point, I usually say, well, and I really don't remember, but so they'll have to send me, the rent roll and stuff, because I probably submitted 60 other offers. And so I'll ask for the rent roll. I'll redo the numbers. And if they're calling you, at this point is where Carl and I will actually look at the deal. Before, we're just looking at the NOI, the cap rate, and all the shit that they put online, which a lot of people say is bullshit, which it might be, but that's what we use to write our offers, because I'm not going to analyze it. Like, so many people waste time analyzing a deal that they don't even have a contract on and they don't even have interest in. I'm not going to do that. So we'll just submit tons of offers, wait for them to call us. When they call us, they have some type of interest. Either they're motivated to sell, they're curious about the structure, whatever. So we'll then use, we'll do AVMs, automated values, from Zillow and from RPR, which we have access to as realtors. But we'll just run the values and kind of see where they come in at on the portfolio. We'll use that to calculate the 75% loan to value. Sometimes we find out that's never going to be an issue. Sometimes we find out it might be an issue and they're going to have to hold a seller second. Or what we do is negotiate the price down. So we're looking at the value to find out, can we beat them up on price? Can we get them to hold a seller second? And usually how we determine whether we're going to beat them up on price or get them to hold a seller second is then dependent on what are they saying the cash flow is. So our NOI and our cap rate, when we look at those numbers, we always factor NOI and cap rate after debt. We don't really care pre-debt. It doesn't matter to us because we're leveraging. So once we get, we'll calculate out all these numbers, cash flow, expenses. We usually add an extra buffer in on expenses because, again, we're not interested in dumping $200,000 into a property. We're interested in buying cash flowing properties that don't need any work, that are kind of already stabilized. So we'll either beat them up on that price after we look at the numbers, and or we'll just get them to hold a seller second. And if it's going to cash flow, then the seller second makes sense. As long as you can pay that seller second and still make a profit, you're good.
So like, for example, if they're asking $1 million for 10 properties, you'll look at the cash flow, and if the cash flow is kind of low, then you'll say, the most we can do is $750,000 for these properties.
Yep.
Because we know they're going to appraise, since they're single family, they're going to appraise it like market value for comps, which will be $1 million. But you'll tell them, because your cash flow is so low that really my numbers don't work unless it's $750,000.
Exactly.
But if the cash flow is good, then you can say, hey, let's do the $750,000, get it in escrow, and then you guys hold a second for $250,000 until we can refinance.
Yeah, because the one thing you run into a lot of the time with people who own these single family portfolios, again, they're not institutional, which is good and it's bad. When they're not institutional, though, that means that they're looking at, they kind of look at this as a property that they own and they love, and they built this up, and now you're telling them that it's worth $25,000 less than they thought. and you might
Right.
have to walk away from that deal. But again, if it's cash flowing, maybe you're willing to bite the bullet and pay a little bit more, knowing that you're going to hold these long term. This is a long term strategy for sure. So if you're definitely cool with holding them 5-10 years, that's where the money is.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so a lot of these people too, they do self-management. Now, two questions.
Oof.
One, are you going to visit the properties? And then
Oh yeah.
two, so even like the stuff in Kentucky, you go down there and you like look at all the properties before you end up closing.
Yeah. So once we run the values and all that stuff, and we draw up, we don't go out until we have a purchase contract. But once we draw up a purchase contract, it's executed by both parties. We'll fly out there. We'll tour every single property, preferably with a couple management companies that we're looking with. So we'll actually bring the managers out together and have them look at the units with us, and or we'll bring out a friend of ours who's a contractor. And we're just looking for. We're not going to pay $300-$400 for inspections. That's crazy stuff. I mean, people are living here. I'm in real estate. Carl's in real estate. We know if there's termites for the most part. Like you can kind of see this stuff, So we're looking for that for FHA issues. We're looking for chipping paint. We're looking for high level things that are going to come up as an inspection problem. And we treat it just as a residential deal after that. We're going to use that as an opportunity to go back and say, hey, this is going to come up in the appraisal. You're going to have to fix that chipping paint. You're going to have to put a railing anywhere there's more than 2 steps. You're going to have to, fix the service cable for the electricity in the building, stuff like that. And so we tour every single property. We ask for every single piece of documentation we can on these. We don't get overly excited. We want bank statements to reconcile what they said they're getting in rent. That's the tough part about self-managed stuff is a lot of times you do have to take their word on some things. So we try to get proof of something. Whether if we can only get a lease, then we'll get a tenant estoppel. If they're collecting a lot of cash, we want to see the cash deposits. Hopefully they're at least making those. But yeah, the self-management stuff is tough. Luckily, most of our stuff has been professionally managed that we've acquired. Because if it's self-managed, chances are that, they're cutting deals. What they're saying on the lease is not what they're actually getting.
Yeah.
And, when they're self-managing, there really are no books to rely on that are any good. Like Bob Mazer, though, in Mazer Real Estate, he self-manages. He literally has notebooks of paper. So he tracks it, but you don't want to go through that shit. Like he literally has notebooks, 80-page notebooks that he writes down every month, what they, notes he talked to them about. I don't want to read any of that stuff. I want a simple report. Carl really dives in on the numbers. I'm not as interested in that as he is. I'm like, what's the NOI after everything? Cool, let's go. And I'll let him analyze the numbers. That's not I can't do stuff like that. It drives me nuts.
And then, so part of a buffer to that, though, is you go and walk through it with a property management company that you're going to use. So if it's like an out-of-state property portfolio, how do you identify the property manager that you're going to use? I guess you bring a couple of them in and you're interviewing them while they're walking through the properties.
Yeah, we're looking for like either a broker referral, someone else that owns property there. If we can get a broker referral, that's always good too, because a lot of times the broker is looking for future business from you, so they're not going to refer someone who sucks. And we do believe that you should change the management company. We 100% believe that when you first take over, because why? Well, all four properties, groups of properties we bought in Pittsburgh, we had to change the management on every single one because they were mismanaged. Yeah. So we've kind of figured that to be the case. In Detroit, however, the guy we're buying from, he's going to continue to manage for us. He has a management company. He owns these properties. He manages them incredibly, like to a T, what we believe property should be managed. He does it that way. We built a really, really good relationship with this guy, and his whole model, and we're going to do a lot of future business together, is he puts together turnkey portfolios. So he buys them cheap, renovates them to a point, stabilizes them, and then resells them as packages. Well, we like to buy them as packages, and he likes to do all the dirty work. So there's a lot of relationship there. And also we can help him a lot on the financing side. So, that ended up being a good relationship. Plus he has a management company. He knows them inside and out. So a situation like that, you really just have to use a common sense approach to how they're being managed. And a big thing that we've noticed, and like stuff that we've had a crackdown on previous managers with, is like, we literally have been told by a management company before, and they're great, that they were concerned about like basically their reviews from tenants.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, no, don't play it. Don't play that game with that. Like, we were seeing stupid shit get repaired on properties, like a light bulb's out and we're paying $25 to have a light bulb changed. Don't do that. So they can change their own light bulb. Lawn services, like, we were getting killed on lawn services. And this is single family real estate. One of the benefits of single family real estate is they live, like, maybe they can't purchase a house. So to own or to rent a home, a separate home that's theirs, they're not in like a quad or a triplex, like, they should be treating it as their home. So we've had tenants who have put in $10,000 kitchens on their own, tenants who have redid the heating system, like stuff like that, and never told us, because they're treating it as their home. But then you have other tenants that are like, every light bulb, they're calling you for light bulbs are out. They're calling you because there's a natural settling crack in the ceiling or something, like stupid stuff like that. And sometimes managers will go and change that. And it's important to catch that quick and just shut that down. Like, no, we don't do that. I don't care about your Google reviews, because your reviews are going to be a hell of a lot worse when they come from an owner of 70 properties versus when they come from a tenant who's been evicted twice previous. Like, no one cares about and no management company should have good reviews, honestly. I mean, if they have good reviews, then they're not doing right by their owner. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that kind of leads my next question, is why stick with this type of, asset type as opposed to like moving into bigger multifamily stuff at this point in time?
Mainly flexibility and everything being negotiable. And the financing terms are attractive. It's on financing. Sometimes we're able to borrow up to 80% loan to value, or 80% loan to cost. So we're able to minimize the risk of us having to go cash in on a refinance. We're usually just good doing rate and term, like I talked about with, on that initial offer, making sure that we have 25 to 30% equity. We also do that because Carl and I don't want to sign a personal guarantee. We refuse to do that. And, if we did have to sign a personal guarantee for some reason, at least we knew there was 25 to 30% equity, and we don't have to worry about in the future having a deficiency judgment in the event of a foreclosure, because you never know. So that's one thing. Financing is good. The other thing is a lot of these guys are mom and pop type shops, to use that term, and they're self-managed, and they've been doing it for 30 years and they're sick of it, and they see kind of young blood come in the industry and they get excited to kind of help you do that. One thing I left out of my Pittsburgh deal is we had one of our sellers, because we didn't have the net worth requirement for the lender, he actually was willing to come on the loan and sign for us just to get the deal done. And he doesn't own any of it. So that's where you got to realize, like, people want to do right by you and help you out. And this guy really went above and beyond. And he wouldn't even let us buy him lunch or dinner. Like, we tried. We were like, Keith, we're coming out. Do you want to meet? No, that's all right. I'm glad I was able to help you guys. And, like, that's how he was.
Yeah.
So that's that piece of it. And then the other thing is that the tenants really do, for the most part, care about these properties. Now, poor management will hurt you there. But Bob Mazer, when I first got into real estate, and he had told me about this deal and told me about management and what to buy, and you get a different answer from everybody. And Carl and I are not locked into one asset class. We do have commercial properties. We do have mixed use properties. We do want to get into larger multifamily, and we do have a 10-unit building. But single family, from what we've seen, like, you can dispute the taxes a lot easier. The tenants are paying the utilities, including the water. They're shoveling the snow because they have to, or they can't leave the house, especially in Pittsburgh. They're mowing their own grass for the most part. They'll make repairs to these units. They leave you alone. They're really treating it like their own property, and the management fees are significantly lower.
Yeah.
So, teach their own, I guess. A lot of people have very strong opinions against single family, and I'm not sure where they get that from, because I always find that those people never really have even owned single family real estate. But we don't discriminate against any asset class. Like, if someone told Carl and I to invest in an ETF, a new ETF that was opening, and that made sense for us, we would do that. Like, so for us, it's all about stacking assets wherever we can get a good deal. And we're not locked into one asset class by any means.
Cool. No, all that makes sense, Okay, so we could go on and on. I got tons of questions I could ask, but let's move to the next section because we are getting a little
Sure.
long here, and I'm sure you're busy with 25,000 companies that you're running. Um, so what's your favorite resource to learn about real estate? Is it books, seminars, podcasts? How do you learn about things that you don't know about?
That's a good question. Well, actually, Carl sends me all the podcasts to listen to. So when he usually works overnight, so there's not much he can
Right.
do. So he sends me podcasts all night. Literally, I wake up with like 10 podcasts. I'm like, dude, thank God I have Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
But so I'll either listen to these different podcasts, but I think that the most important part is to have either transact somehow as a realtor. I think that was the best way I learned, just learning the value of property that way, learning how the deal flow works. But the next most important thing wasn't necessarily, I never really needed to learn how to get the deal done. I'm a fan of figuring that out as we go, but just kind of following Grant Cardone really, if anybody, like even more than Bob Mazer, whoever pushed me over the edge was Grant Cardone. And I went to his second 10X, third, and hopefully I'll go to the one in February. But just his principles of you don't need to know anything, that was the key for me. You just get it done, and it's like everything's negotiable, nothing's set in stone. You can really work everything out. The one thing I didn't say is Carl and I bought all these properties with no security deposits. Relationship was key more than anything, and just taking the massive action approach of, those deals took 1.5 years too. Well, our contracts were for 90 days, but because we were able to build relationships and figure this out and keep showing them data, like, hey, your properties suck, like we need to stabilize them, we were able to drag that out over 1.5 years. But I think podcast, if anything, for the educational stuff, we get a lot from podcast. And then we're really just digging in on guys that are in real estate, like Steve Lloyd in Philadelphia with Stone Bay Holdings. I know who he is. He's at a massive level. And I'm going to I bid on something at a charity event. So for $3,000, I get to spend 3 days with him now, all for donating to a charity. 3 days with him and a bunch of bigger pockets, like authors. Forget their names. Jay Scott.
Oh,
something.
Yeah. Jay and Carol Scott, maybe? Yeah, I think.
That's it. Yeah. And and then him and his partner, and then a few other people. But so just learning from these people, like in-person mentors too, that's key. I mean, sure. That's it. There's so much data out there. I guess that's the point, is like a lot of people just sit around, and I also don't think that it's like there's too much information out there, and I don't even know that it's learning about that stuff. That's the important piece. I think it's that so many people are just sitting around overanalyzing deals and like trying to save pennies. Like one guy is pretty successful, who sold us a group of properties, like preached self-management when he was losing cash, like bleeding cash flow. And he's like states and states over trying to self-manage these. And it's like, you shouldn't be worrying about that. Like you either want to be in the owner business or the management business. And he's more of like a manager. He shouldn't be owning properties. And that's why he had to sell them like 6 months after owning them. So I think there's a lot of data out there. So you got to be careful who you get it from. But at the end of the day, pick and choose your data, and really you just got to do it. And I think you do have to get punched. I don't think there's any other way to do it. I think you have to screw up. You have to take a 2 year to close a deal. You have to lose a security deposit at some point. And until you start doing that, learning the value of property, then you're never going to get to 176 units. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. Yeah. Podcasts are great to like, not to teach you everything, but at least to spark the idea and get you a little bit of motivation to go out and then like do the deal and like learn the actual process. So that definitely makes sense. So what about what's your favorite app or piece of technology that you use in your business that makes everything work better? Do you have anything like that?
Actually, I just got one. I just started using it. It's called Bench, this accounting platform. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but they're like our bookkeeper now. They're our monthly bookkeeper. And I knocked them down on price real bad. They start at like $1,000 a month for 4 companies, and I got them down to I think $549 total. But so they're going to do my monthly bookkeeping, because that was one thing. Like people say, well, where are you this month? Like I personally don't care. I'm just on to the next deal. I'm just stacking. And I was like, I don't know. I know I have money in my account, so that's good. And I know we're cash flowing every month, so that's good. But I never really knew where we stood profit and losses. So this will be good. I mean, for us, this new year, we really systemized a lot of things. We're going to go to 200 realtors. We're going to open up in 19 more states for the mortgage company, physical locations with real estate brokers. So we need to know where our numbers are. We need to make sure we're not running negative, because it's hard to tell. I mean, there's always money coming in, there's always money going out. And like, unless you have a clear picture of that on a daily basis, we really wouldn't know, especially the way I operate. Yeah. So, it's good to have that. So I'm using Bench for accounting. So that's extremely helpful. And we just implemented that, but I think that's going to be huge for us.
Sweet. All right. That's good to know. All right. Well, Joe, I thank you being here. Where can people find out more about you, contact you, your Instagram, your businesses, anything like that?
Yeah, if they want to DM me on Instagram, it's at Joseph C. McCabe. If you just search Joe McCabe REMAX or Joe McCabe Realtor or something like that, I pop up everywhere. I'm always happy to help. Shoot me an email at joe@homefrontloans.com. I try to get to you and answer any questions I can about how the process works.
Cool. Well, Joe, man, I thank you for being here. That was a ton of information. Hopefully I'm sure they will find value out of that. And hopefully we'll have you back when you have 1,000 units in 3 months from now, maybe. How's that?
Yeah, hopefully. We'll make it 2.
Okay. All right, Joe. Well, thanks again, and you have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thank you.
See ya.